first episode of Home Games for 2021. Bubba O'Neill, he's not been fired. He's not resigned. He is simply on assignment. So the three of us will plug ahead. Here we go. The Toronto Blue Jays brass has publicly anyway been in on pretty much every big name that's available this offseason, and yet so far nothing. Now, by the time this gets on the air, by the time this is loaded, they could have signed somebody. But Steve, so far it's a lot of overpromising and a lot of under-delivering. Should Blue Jay fans be a little cynical and a little doubting of what the Blue Jays brass is capable of doing?
Well, yeah, I think there's some basis for that, Scott, but I think part of it is also situational. Look what they've had to do last year and this year, and if you're signing, especially some of the better older free agents are available maybe for a year and a half. What does that year and a half look like? Given that Canada's shown a stricter adherence to COVID things than anywhere else. And I think that has an awful lot to do with it. And perhaps as home fans and media, we maybe overrate a little bit what the Jays actually have as their base that they can sell to a player that's looking to win a championship.
I think there's a couple of factors here. Number one, COVID, obviously, teams are looking at their budgets, and I know we've heard that the Blue Jays are ready to make some big splash or big splashes, so they're willing to spend. But I think the other side of the equation is, what are the players looking for, and are they looking for too much? And are the Jays and other teams, because we haven't seen a lot of action across the majors, are they looking at their bottom lines to say, this number doesn't fit with us? I think now that Francisco Lindor has finally been traded, I think that kind of is going to not necessarily set the market, but I think pressure other teams to say, hey, we got to make a move now. So whether it's getting DJ LeMahieu or JT Realmuto or, some of the other Trevor Bauer, some of the other, high profile free agents out there, I think those are going to start to fall. It'll be interesting to see what kind of dollars and what kind of term, especially, they bring in.
I look at it, there's got to be one of two things going on here, and I don't know which one it is because we're not in the meetings, we're not in the discussions, but the Jays have publicly lost out on bidding for a couple Asian stars. One guy decided not even to come when it was seemingly the Jays were the big bidder. So it's either that they're not willing to do whatever it takes to get someone, for better or for worse, or there's a reluctance, as Rick alludes to, for players to come to Toronto for whatever reason. And to me, if it's the second reason, Steve, that's a far bigger, far more troubling issue. If you're back at this place where now you've got to pay a huge extra to convince a player to come to Toronto, man, that's a tough spot if that's what this franchise is facing.
Well, and it could be that could be part of it. We don't really know. I think there's a lot of things conspiring here, and I think Rick hit on one of them indirectly with there's a couple of major players in the market that have really upped their game, and that's the Mets and San Diego. And you look at that, and I think there's some holdout there to see where exactly they go. Now that maybe that, as Rick says, now that Lindor has signed or been traded, something could happen there. But it's clear that the Mets are taking on the Yankees within the city, and that is something. And then San Diego, of course, they've got to look at something out there with the Dodgers, right? So you got to do something about that, and it may be, just given the COVID-19 situation, given the fact that they haven't got the contracts, that's the other part of it. Nobody's really sure what the CBA is going to end up doing, that kind of thing, or they're going to end up in a situation like they did last year. So I think it's made an awful lot of confusion. This isn't to let the Jays management off the hook, because other teams have signed players.
Oh yeah.
So
that's a good point too. The CBA ends this year; it expires after the season. So yeah, some players might not want to sign a long-term deal, especially with a club that's going to be forced to play somewhere else this season. Right. They're looking at the division and the American League as well. So, I mean, they're taking a lot of these things into account.
You could maybe say that Tampa Bay is a little less a player than it was, but
yeah,
you always say that about Tampa Bay, and the Yankees.
They always seem to find a way. Steve, you know what this reminds me of in a lot of ways, and this is a throwback to some people of a certain vintage who can remember this, who are our age or older. I mean, and Steve, you covered this. Pat Gillick for the longest time was stand pat, and the knock against him was that he wouldn't do whatever it took. He wouldn't make a bold move. He wouldn't push the limits a little more, and then all of a sudden he makes that trade for Alomar and Carter, and that reputation is gone, and they win. And I get the sense, I'm hearing, and you get the feeling on social media and elsewhere, that's the knock, or that's the feeling about the Jays' current management, that they want to do something, but they just are not willing to push it and take that leap of risk that might be required to do something big. That you could make a move if you really wanted to say, you know what, let's go for it.
Well, there are a number of areas in which risks take form. The two major ones, of course, are financial, which would be straight out free agents. The others are trades for expiring contracts and that kind of thing. And the price has been fairly high for some of those, and the Jays are.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, Steve, the story is that Springer, who's their big target, and again, by the time this is loaded and you see it, he may have signed somewhere, but the report was he wants 150 million for 5 years, and the Jays offered 125, which is well below. And you look and you say, well, if they really want him, there's the price. Now, is it worth it? I don't know, but there's the price.
Well, and people like Springer are analyzing where they fit in the lineup, and you look at the Jays' young lineup and say that, you know, you can put in here, maybe you have Delgado or Delgado.
What year is it?
Yeah, what years? but you could have some of their top young guns batting behind him to protect him and that kind of thing. But maybe this is what I'm saying, that maybe that because we see them all the time, we recognize the potential that not every older player would necessarily say, I'm coming here. And on the pitching end, you look at this team and say, they don't catch the ball.
No, they need help.
Nothing proven that they don't catch the ball. And how much does that turn into? There are stats about that, but there are other stats that can't, even by the most detailed stats, extended stats, be able to metrics pick that up on what that effect has on a pitcher's brain.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, they're going to have to weigh the return on investment. A guy like Springer, if they're going to pay him that kind of money, you know, the thought has to be, is that one bat, is that one glove in the outfield going to make that big of a difference? They're going to look at the WAR, the wins against replacement. And if it's at a particular number that they agree with, maybe they spend that money, but that money is going to negate them from giving it to another free agent or another player in a trade that they'll have to pay a little more money to.
A number of home games ago, we discussed the topic, and this was well before hockey got back into business. It was during the early discussion phases of the Canadian division. We discussed and debated who would win the Canadian division. Well, now, Rick, that hockey is going, we see what the teams are going to be on the ice. Let's revisit this. Who is going to finish first? And we're not even talking about the playoffs, just the regular season. Who's going to finish first in the Canadian division?
Well, I think many home games ago, I said the Edmonton Oilers would be in top spot. And I'm going to have to backtrack from that because, you know, the feeling that I'm getting, the vibe that I'm getting out of the Toronto Maple Leafs camp, and not to be a homer, but, you know, I like what they've done in the offseason. You know, the holes that they filled, the veterans that they brought in, you know, very intrigued by how Joe Thornton is going to be on that top line with Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. I think it could be, it could go very well. You know, the power play is going to be lethal. Penalty killing, you know, one of the best, I think, in the division. It's going to come down to Frederik Andersen. You know, he's in a contract year. Can he deliver? Can he not allow that one kind of goal in a critical game? And if he can get by that, I think they're the team to beat.
Yeah, I think the structure of the season, given that it in one way it's like playoffs because you're playing the team so many times, you get to know each other, and there'll be some back-to-backs in there too, right? And so you get to know the teams and you'll get to know their strengths, but it'll be the same for Andersen as well. So he'll have that whole, I mean, that's a whole season, and the Leafs as well, of playing against the same kind of teams who are going to use that same counterattack, or reaction, counter reaction, counter reaction, that kind of thing that goes with playoffs. And that may be very, very helpful to the Leafs because they never get a sustained practice at that. They lose out in the first round. This way, they'll see where their weaknesses are. I think the presence of Thornton on the top line will help them on that. I don't know that they're going to do that as much as we think they'll do it in the early going, because I think they can outpower teams early. So get those points early in the season, so you're making the playoffs, and then you can do some of that other stuff, which is, and I don't want to use the word character building, but it's similar to that, isn't it? When we're talking about preparing for the playoff.
Steve, I'm not sure they can overpower those teams early. This is a division that, Ottawa to me is the one wild card.
Mm-hmm.
And Ottawa might not be as bad as people think, because last year they had, if nothing else, they played really hard. Back when we did this the first time, I said the Montreal Canadiens, and I based that almost exclusively on Carey Price.
Right.
I'm not going to back off too much from that, because I think Carey Price, in modern NHL,
they got backup.
the goalie can
still backup here too.
Yeah, and they got a backup with Jake Allen. But in modern NHL, a goalie can dominate. The team that intrigues me now a little bit more is the Vancouver Canucks, and I'll tell you why. It's because when you look at the Canadian division and the travel that's involved, the West Coast teams are used to that coast to coast to coast time zone changes and everything else. The other teams will get used to it, but I think Vancouver is in an advantageous position that way, just with the being familiar with what is going to be involved with all that travel, which is a grind.
Yeah. The one question mark I have with Vancouver, and I think it's a fantastic team. They have a lot of great young talent on that team. It's going to come down to the goaltending as well. I know Thatcher Demko was outstanding in the playoffs last season, and bringing a Stanley Cup winner and a veteran like Braden Holtby is a great sign and an awesome backup. But if Demko falters and Holtby can't regain some of that Stanley Cup form, they might be in trouble. The one thing I'll say about Montreal is they're probably the one team that plays the best system and is the most consistent at playing that system. And if that system is working, they're a tough team to beat, especially 5-on-5. Their power play has been atrocious the last couple of years. They got a good penalty kill, but if Carey Price can be the Carey Price of old, that's going to be a tough out as well.
Well, and they got, depending on how Claude's health is, they've got that veteran coaching too, who's been, he takes a lot of knocks for a lot of things, but Claude Julien is, that kind of coach. And I like Maurice in Winnipeg too. I think for the most part, he gets more people out of it. I think that's a team that I wonder about them. I'm not quite sure where they're at. I mean, we know that they're capable of doing great things in the net, and they've got some really dynamic players, but I kind of wonder. I'm still wondering too about Montreal down the middle, aren't you?
Well, look, there's every team has its issues. I mean, you even Toronto with all of its depth, you say, yeah, but you don't win anything when it matters. At least you haven't in the lot with this group. So is it here, let's finish with this. Is it a foregone conclusion in both of your minds? Is it an absolute that Ottawa finishes last in the Canadian division? Because I'm going to say no. I'm going to say Ottawa's not going to finish last. They're not going to finish first. They're not going to finish in the top half, but they're going to finish not last.
So you're banking on either Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, Winnipeg, Edmonton, or Vancouver finishing last.
Yes, and I have two teams. Well, a few teams come to mind of teams not that you would predict because they don't have skill, but just based on past track record that could disappoint. I mean, Edmonton could disappoint. They've done it. The Jets with Line A and with that thing, whatever is going on there, that could be a bit of an implosion. I don't like Ottawa to do anything, but as I say, one thing that they did do last year, and you got to give them credit for, is they were a really, really hardworking team that gave teams problems. And if they can get any kind of performances, I'm not sure they finish. I'm not sure it's a sure thing, which a lot of people are saying.
It's hard to sustain that against the same teams.
It is
all the time. And the other part that plays into this, I think the only way that I don't know about Winnipeg, but the only way that anybody else could finish last, I think, would be through a key injury. So
yes, but that could happen.
Who are the ones that are most susceptible to, say, one key injury? And let's say there's two. There's going to be one for every team.
Calgary, you lose that. You lose your goalie.
Yeah, you lose the goalie because they've got a tendency to underperform. When you mention teams that have underperformed, that
or Winnipeg loses their goalie. Winnipeg loses Hellebuck.
Yeah, and then
now you've got a problem.
Then some of their other flaws start to show up. I mean, that's a team that's changed their defense entirely, right, over a period of a year and a half.
Yeah,
a year and a half, and so if you lose the goalie, when you're still gelling again as a defense, where are you?
I'll say this about Ottawa: they're a very hardworking team. Head coach DJ Smith has that team playing as hard as they can. Is that sustainable every game for 56 games? Maybe, because it's only 56 games.
Yeah, that's true.
Bringing in Matt Murray in net, I think, is a huge plus and a huge upgrade. Can he stay healthy? That's a big question mark as well. I think Ottawa is going to be better, but I don't think they're going to be better than the other 6 teams.
Here's your chance. Comment down below your chance to make a prediction before the season starts, so you can be brilliant when it happens or doesn't happen. Will Ottawa automatically finish last in the Canadian division, or who else might? Comment down below. Let us know. The 1 minute debate today. Here's how it's going to work. I am going to give Steve, I am going to give Rick, and then they will give me a number. And they have to choose, we have to choose which player, any sport, which player was the best to wear that number. And Steve, we're going to go to you first. You are going to get number 32. Who are some of the candidates? Who are some of the candidates for number 32? Before you start, here's some. You can maybe come with another one. Shaquille O'Neal, Jim Brown, Magic Johnson, Julius Erving, Sandy Koufax, Karl Malone, Marcus Allen, Franco Harris, O.J. Simpson, before he got into the killing business, Dave Winfield, Steve Carlton, Bill Walton.
Wow.
Steve Milton. 3, 2, 1, begin.
If I'm not mistaken, number 32 in 1 year in the big leagues, 3 of the 4 MVPs were wearing it. And that, I think Elston Howard wore it for the Yankees, didn't it, the year that he won the won the MVP. I'm going to go with Jim Brown. Just because he's so dominated an era of a running game NFL. He, his name was the same as the team that he played for, in a way it was named after the other Brown, of course. I'd have to give, I'm a big I'm a big Julius Erving fan, Dr. J, but I'm going to go with Brown just because of his dominance in the league. He's still remembered as that. He's still remembered as perhaps the greatest running back. It's between him and maybe 2 or 3 other guys. And I'll go with Brown, but 32 is a very difficult one. And boy, it was proven in that 1 year when 3 of the, I think what was that, 1954, when 3 of the MVPs wore it.
Jim Brown. I mean, I don't know how you argue against Jim Brown, Rick, but I would include Magic Johnson in the discussion. But yes, it was Jim Brown was a tough one to not have there. All right, Rick, you are up next. Number for you, and I chose this specifically because you are such a big soccer guy.
Oh, geez.
Number for Rick is number 10.
Oh, my God.
All right, here are some of the candidates that could fall into number 10. Diego Maradona, Pele, Lionel Messi, Ronaldinho, Zinedine Zidane, Roberto Baggio, Wayne Rooney, Neymar, Walt Frazier, Andre Dawson, Guy Lafleur, George Armstrong, Phil Rizzuto. I'm guessing this is probably a soccer one for you, but Rick Zamperin, 3, 2, 1, go.
Wow. Number 10, iconic. That is the number you want to wear if you're a soccer player. Number 9 is a close second, but the 10 means a whole heck of a lot. It basically means you are the star of the show. And for me, I can go so many different ways, but the heartstrings are tugging at me to go to Roberto Baggio. And I know he missed the penalty shot in the 94 World Cup, a game that I was this close of attending, but did not. But, here's an iconic, maybe perhaps the best Italian soccer player ever. And I know I'm going to probably get some hate mail from that because there's so many. But to me, he kind of epitomized this new generation of Italian soccer players, the creativity, the not necessarily relying on defense. He was a guy that could do a lot of different things, and I think did it very, very well. Did it well on the big stage, did it well domestically. He was a guy that I think carried the number and wore the number 10 extremely well.
It's
Wow.
hard to argue with that, especially nicely done right off the cuff there.
I know. Wow.
Because he's such a soccer guy, what Rick won't say is why number 10 has always been the number to wear, and it isn't always just about emulating another player. It's because soccer always historically they don't do it as much anymore, but they number the players by position, and 10, of course, is the middle attack.
Well, like baseball used to. Like
the way that baseball still does in the
order.
scoring. It still does in the scoring. It was very similar in exactly the same way. And so number 10 was the guy who always had the ball. and was a center striker, right?
Uh-huh.
Number 9 was the one beside him, sort of the attacking, sometimes attacking midfielder, sometimes attacking striker. But I'm a Pele guy simply because he brought, just judging by North America, when he was around, soccer, at least you knew what it was because of him. And not just because he came here later in his career, but because he was so striking, excuse the pun.
Mhm.
All right, so you guys got to give me a number now. You can choose what you want. Rick, Steve, what number should I do?
Steve, I'll let you do the honors.
Yeah, I was going to say that in road hockey, when we were all growing up, at least when I was growing up, which is before you guys, everybody wanted to wear number 9.
Number 9. All right.
We could go with that.
Oh, let's see. I've got the list here of a bunch of them. Let me find number 9. All right, number 9, because you know what. It was one of the ones I thought you might have chosen because there are certain numbers. 7 might have been another one. 3 might have been another one. 1. Number 9, some of the options: Gordie Howe, Ted Williams, Drew Brees, Joe DiMaggio, Maurice Richard, Bobby Hull, Reggie Jackson, Bill Elliott. All right, 3, 2, 1. I don't think there's a choice here, unfortunately. I mean, Joe DiMaggio, yes, fantastic. Gordie Howe, Mr. Hockey, but how is it not Ted Williams? You have what I still believe is the hardest skill, the hardest thing to do in all of sports, which is to hit a baseball. And you have the best ever probably at doing it. And you have a guy who still has, records that are decades and decades and decades haven't been touched and won't ever be touched. And I know that the game has changed, and I know that I know relief pitchers and specialists and all the rest have changed things, and that who knows if Ted Williams would have hit 400 if he was in this era. But boy, oh boy, I look at him and I think the only way to compare athletes from different eras is against their contemporaries. And Ted Williams was miles ahead of his contemporaries. I don't know how you don't choose Ted Williams. And the fact that he's now lying on a bed of ice, frozen in a cryogenic tank, also makes it kind of cool. So
He'll be back.
He'll be back with Walt Disney in a new performance. I don't know.
Well, one of the things that makes that argument sound, and I've complimented you way too much in the last couple of weeks, but is that in the other sport where it's iconic, Wayne Gretzky wore 2 9s. Right. As an honor to that number. Wore 9 growing up.
You could have put Gretzky on that list. We could have put Gretzky on that list.
2 9s, right?
Theoretically. Well,
2 9s and define. But there are so many great Canadian. Everybody had a great number 9 in the original 6. Pretty well. Even the Leafs' best player, when they were crummy, moved over from number 17 to number 9, which was Dick Duff back then. And everybody else, the best player on their team, pretty well was wearing number 9. The thing about Williams is today, and he hasn't played since 1961, I think it was. They're still comparing players' swings to him.
Yeah.
Warrood and a few players. Who else have they compared? A couple of modern day guys or current guys. Their swings compared to Ted Williams. Well, that's pretty lasting, isn't it?
The guy who may in the future get more recognition or more, because when I first said Drew Brees, I was like, really, Drew Brees? But you know what? In time, I think Drew Brees is going to be seen as more iconic than he is now, and Joe DiMaggio. But anyway, folks, thank you for watching. Subscribe down below. You can do it right down there. We would love to see you again soon because we'll be back. We'll be talking to you soon. Take care.